Star Wars Episode 9, The Emperor Strikes Back. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. Hi, Daniel, can you please explain to the audience what we are going to be discussing?
So this is the 9th and final episode of our journey through the Star Wars saga. The series is called Have You Seen?, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and some of us have just seen for the first time. We've made our way all the way to the end to Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, which Hervé and I have seen before and you just saw for the first time. So what's your general takeaway of the final chapter in the Star Wars saga?
There's no limits to the Force. Like I said, you know what? This episode has definitely added more confusion when it comes to just the limitations of the Force and what the Force actually is. Firstly, let me start off by saying I actually enjoyed this movie from when Rhea lightning came out of Rhea's fingers. When that happened, I was like, oh, okay. That's strange and that's interesting because I'm only Palpatine, which ended up being alive again. I've only seen that from him, so I'm like, oh, okay, so there's more to her story. But overall, I actually enjoyed this one. Of all the movies, I'll definitely say it was definitely top 3. But yeah, there was still more confusions when it comes to like what the Force is. And cool question, was there like some sort of Christianity, like did they get some of the inspiration from Christianity? Because even like at the end when people are dying, like Rhea dies, they pretty much disappear like Jesus did. And then the way that they speak sometimes and their philosophies, and it's like it feels very like there's some sort of Christian influence in that. I don't know.
So the Force and the Code of the Jedi is very closely inspired by East Asian religions such as Buddhism and Taoism. So this whole thing of letting go of the self and being at peace with the world and things like that, those are very much Buddhist concepts, as understood by George Lucas in the 70s. So that part, I would say, is not directly a Christian thing. The whole thing about the chosen Messiah that is a virgin birth and stuff like that, that is very close to a Jesus allegory, right?
Like even the theme of sacrifice was big in this as well. I was thinking, okay, so yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, I'm just saying Anakin's story like has like a Jesus allegory in it, even if there's other stuff going on. But yeah, just the Force in general is very much influenced by East Asian religions primarily.
Jonathan. Yeah. I'm very curious to know, what was your thoughts when you saw Palpatine had come back, and did you think it was a good choice?
It was interesting because I didn't know. Like, okay, so before starting the movie, I didn't know what was next for them, right? Well, I actually didn't know what was next. I thought, okay, so now they're gonna go up against Kylo Ren. By the way, guys, if you're new to this, just know I always get characters' names wrong. So I always ask for clarification. But Kylo Ren, right? So I thought, okay, the story was gonna be now it's Rey versus Kylo Ren. So then bringing back Palpatine, I didn't have an issue with it.
Even though you saw him die at the end of
even though we saw him die. I get it, but there's many things in Star Wars which I wouldn't say is ridiculous, but it's very, let's just say, over the top and unrealistic, right? So with Palpatine coming back to life, I obviously I saw him die, but at the same time I said, it's freaking Star Wars, so it is what it is. Like, who knows what could have happened. And plus, he looked like he was barely living anyways. And where they found him, it kind of was fitting for where he actually died. So I was like, okay, so maybe somehow he survived the fall. And then obviously, he could hardly move anyways. But then, yeah. So obviously when Rey and Kylo Ren ended up giving him life force, which, by the way, their relationship dynamic is very, very dodgy. But, so when they ended up giving him his life force back, I was like, okay, it was pretty cool. And also what I found cool was that they didn't kill off the enemy straight away, as in, especially when when the enemy reaches their full potential. A lot of movies have a tendency to kill them off like a minute later, or even straight away, or before they even reach their potential. So I like the fact that they actually allowed Palpatine to reach his full potential and cause havoc, even though it lasted for about 3, 4, 5 minutes. But still, I like seeing that. But yeah, in terms of Palpatine coming back, I didn't have an issue with it, and I'm assuming a lot of Star Wars fans did.
Let's look into that. So, does it change Anakin's story arc? He was supposed to be the chosen one who brings balance to the Force. Yeah. He gets redeemed by turning on Vader and killing him, and just before dying, right? So, and at that moment, he has brought balance to the Force because he has removed, like, the idea of balance in the Force is not well defined in the movie, so there are different thoughts in terms of what that exactly means. One of those interpretations is that the dark side is the imbalance, and so as long as there are people using the dark side, there's imbalance in the Force. And Vader or Anakin brought an end to that imbalance by killing Palpatine and then dying so that there were no Sith left. Another interpretation is that both the Jedi and the Sith died with Anakin Skywalker, right? Because there was no Jedi Order afterwards, and there were also no Sith, and so there was the Force was in balance again. Whichever interpretation you subscribe to, that was Anakin's big character arc, right? That he, in the end, turned on Palpatine and atoned for his crimes, right? By spending his last moments of his life trying to end that evil. And now we learn that he hasn't. Does that matter?
I don't necessarily, for me personally, I don't think it matters. The reason why I say that is because of who Anakin became. So it's not like he was a hero. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though he became a hero in those last 2 minutes of his life, or not his life, near the end of his life, you know, I think it had some impact for a couple of years. I don't know how many years forward, but it had impact for, you know, the amount of years that Palpatine was pretty much in hiding or just away. Do you know what I'm saying? So it did have impact, but it just didn't have impact to the point where it ended or brought balance to, you know, what you were saying. What you saying? It brought balance to what? Sorry,
the Force.
Yeah, it brought balance to the
Force. That was the big prophecy in the prequels, right? That everybody was concerned about, that Anakin was supposed to bring balance to the Force, but then he betrayed the Jedi, and what does that mean exactly, and so on.
Yeah. But who was saying that he was supposed to bring balance to the Force?
That was the prophecy, and everybody believed that Anakin was the one who was going to fulfill the prophecy. And then it looked like he did because of what happened in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I see.
Is it a more interesting story if Anakin dies without having fulfilled the prophecy, but thinking that he has? Does that make the story more interesting?
Depending on how they move forward. And so far, how they've moved forward has been, I don't know if you could say it was justified, because obviously finding out that Rey was actually the last Jedi, and, you know, the Jedi who brings order or balance to the Force, you know, her being Palpatine's granddaughter, so her being a Sith. Yeah, I say it depends on how they actually move forward with the story. And for me personally,
suppose this is the end.
Suppose this is the end.
So this is being marketed as the Skywalker saga, right? So episode 1 through 9 is the Skywalker saga, and then after that something new starts. Whether it's a good label or not is debatable, but that's how it's labeled, right? So episode 9 is the end. So that is the complete story of the Skywalkers, right? So to you, it didn't really impact Anakin as a character.
For me, it didn't really impact as a character. 2 reasons, like I said, because you have to understand, Anakin ended up turning to the Force. So it was like him having such a happy ending, or bringing, you know, like you say, him fulfilling the prophecy. Was like, I don't mind if he was like a character, like, let's say, for example, Han Solo or Luke Skywalker, for example, then I would be pretty like, oh, they're pretty much amounting to nothing. Then I'd understand, because they literally, you know, they fought for their lives. You know, they fought for the people around them. They literally fought for pretty much the galaxy, right? Whereas Darth Vader, he was pretty much killing the galaxy. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, cool, yeah. At the end of the day, he ended up, you know, killing Palpatine, and ended up, you know, saving the galaxy and fulfilling the prophecy. But, you know, most of his life he was doing madness. So, you know, hey man, the bad can't be getting rewarded. But I'm Christian, and so I do believe if you end up repenting near the end of your life, hooray, I'm happy for you too. So I'm contradicting myself, but yeah, that's my first point regarding why I don't necessarily mind, because he was a bad man most of his life. The second reason is because I kind of like when old villains end up coming back. For example, when Frieza ended up coming back in Dragon Ball Z when we all thought he died, I was ecstatic because I freaking loved Frieza. So Palpatine was kind of similar. Like, he was that guy's full of BS, man. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you never believe that. Even when Rey came back, he was saying, "Oh, I didn't really want them to kill you. I didn't really want Kylo Ren to kill you. I just wanted him to bring you here, or that was my plan for you to end up coming here so you can take the throne." I'm like, this guy is just full. Even though he probably was telling the truth, but that guy, he's just full of BS and sacrifice. But anyways, yeah, so I didn't mind, for me, that Palpatine ended up coming back, even though, like I said, he did die in front of all of our faces, ish, kind of, even though he dropped in darkness. He fell in the black pit, but still, I didn't really mind because, you know, I think out of all the villains in Star Wars, Palpatine is definitely the one that gives you that, like, he is the one that kind of makes things, what's the word? He produces that strong conflict in the movie like that. He's the one that raises the stakes when it comes to, like, you know, the difference between bad and good, and you know, how close it is from the world, you know, how close it is that the villain's actually going to end up winning, and just, you know, he just pretty much, he's the stake raiser is what I'm trying to say. So I didn't mind him coming back.
Does he do anything interesting in this movie?
Besides, not really. Okay, if you want me to be honest, not really, because all he's doing is, in comparison to how he was in the, you know, in Anakin's journey, no, not really, because the only thing that he says is he tells Kylo Ren to go and kill Rey, and then he creates that BS story about, oh, he didn't really want them to kill Rey, he just wanted her to come here. So not really, doesn't really do that something necessarily anything interesting when it comes to being strategic with what he's doing, but his presence and his voice, and I think the nostalgia and remembering of how, like, devious this guy can be is what kind of contributed to why I liked him in this film.
What was your reaction when it was revealed that Rey was his granddaughter?
Considering as well, I think there's been, like, the whole, throughout sort of the sequel trilogy, the whole wondering who she is she nobody, is she someone, this, that, and the other.
So in The Force Awakens, it is hinted that her grandparents, her parents are somewhat important. And then The Last Jedi was all about how they're nobodies. And now she's the granddaughter of the biggest villain of the setting. So what's your reaction to that?
That's something, even though I do admit, like, when I saw the lightning come out of her hands, that's when I started getting more engaged in the film. Even though, you know, that happened, I think it felt like they just had to make up something interesting. Because I remember I brought the point about all the revelations about each character has been very interesting except for Reyes, right? So it's like, I don't know if people were upset with Reyes' revelation in terms of being a nobody in the 8th movie. I'm not too sure. I don't know what the reaction was like, but I'm assuming if the reaction was like me, was like, oh, okay, her character pretty much amounted to nothing. It seems like Star Wars were like, you know what? Let's just make up a story, make things interesting, and say, you know, in the next film, she's a granddaughter. Like, even when Kylo Ren said to her in this movie, oh, I didn't tell you the full truth, or something about I was lying, it's like, that kind of felt forced rather than it felt like this was the plan all along. So it didn't necessarily, I don't think personally for me, I don't think the creators of this film, I don't think this was the original plan. I don't think they said, okay, Rey is going to be the granddaughter of Palpatine. I just think they just added that because, you know, people were disappointed with what her revelation was in episode 8. So I think if that wasn't the case, where that was always the plan that Rey was going to be Palpatine's granddaughter, then I don't think Kylo Ren should have said in episode 8 that you're a nobody. He should have continued on adding to the mystery to make it flow with this, for it to connect, because it just felt a bit disconnected. Was okay, you're a nobody and now you're somebody. It just didn't feel like it was, you know, connected.
Yeah, so this movie has been described as a very faithful adaptation of complaints about The Last Jedi. Right? Okay. So basically, my opinion is everything that happens in this movie is because people complained about The Last Jedi. Right? So people didn't like that Rey was a nobody, so now she's the descendant of somebody important. And so they just picked Palpatine out of her head, basically, is my opinion. And then everything else too, like, it feels a lot more like a conventional Star Wars movie, right? There's more like Luke's character is essentially back to where you would expect him to be, and the list kind of goes on, right? So and part of that is also that they are trying to give the other characters personalities and backstories, right? To the point where I would say they're trying to do a full trilogy in one movie, right? So, for example, the whole opening sequence with the scavenger hunt feels a lot like the opening part of a trilogy to me, like a lot like the first movie of a trilogy. That's not just my theory, right? That's basically what happened, right? Like, if you follow the production process, people like the people making this were kind of freaked out by the reaction to the Last Jedi, and then basically tried to fix the trilogy in the last movie. And so every choice they made was in pursuit of that goal, right? Is that something you picked up on during the movie, or did this seem like a natural extension of the two movies that came before?
Well, like I said before, it didn't feel like a continuation. Because it felt like a whole different movie rather than an extension because of, like I said, Kylo Ren's revelation of Rey that she was a complete nobody. So it was like, okay. And then obviously Palpatine coming back. So it was like, what I originally thought was, okay, it was going to be Kylo Ren versus, what's her name? Rhea. And then, of course, it was going to be filled with internal conflict from both of them because you can see they already have some sort of bond, which, like I said, is weird. But yeah, so then when it shifted to, okay, Palpatine coming back, Kylo Ren just like, them not chasing, them not pretty much beefing with Kylo Ren anymore. It's going to be, okay, a whole new villain. And Kylo Ren's kind of under that villain, but he's not really under that villain. He's trying to still take over, but still bringing Rhea to his side. So it felt it felt like a whole new story. If I'm being honest, it felt like a whole new story. It didn't feel like a continuation. And I don't know. I don't know if it's a bad thing for me personally, but at the same time, it does kind of taint a bit the whole Star Wars experience because it's like they should have kept to one storyline, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So I think they should have just kept to, the battle between Kylo Ren and Rey and that internal conflict, just keep that going. Because like I said, it did feel like because I think they tried to keep that storyline going because you saw when Kylo Ren ended up going back to the lightsaber, throwing away his lightsaber, but it felt very abrupt. So I do understand that it did feel like a whole completely different story rather than a continuation.
What did you think about the screen time given to Finn and Poe? So in the Force Awakens, Rey, Finn, and Poe kind of seem to be the new main cast, right? And then Finn and Poe kind of fell off to the background very quickly during The Last Jedi, right? And now they're kind of back. And I think this is the first movie where they're all in the same scene at the same time. I think, if I don't misremember. And they give them a whole bunch of background details and stuff to do. Did that feel like a good addition, and was there enough of that?
It was an addition that made sense. I don't think it really had any impact in my life, because it felt like Finn's story. Wait, who's John Boyega's character again?
That's Finn.
Boyega's Finn, yeah. Because Finn's character, I thought it was gonna. I thought him and what's her name? The girl that kissed him, the Asian girl that kissed him in episode 8.
Rose.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be more of a progression to their story, but
yeah, there isn't really, right?
Nothing.
No,
yeah, there was nothing.
That was another thing that was corrected from the last movie, where people had complaints about their whole side mission and their whole romance. So I think they completely just gave her a backseat in this movie.
And didn't really like her in general, and so now she's still here, but she's nothing to do, right? She has maybe 2 lines. So that's another thing where you can kind of trace it back to complaints on Reddit. Right.
Okay. But even Finn, and Rey's character felt unfinished because, of course, that scene where they were sinking, it wasn't sandpaper, it was like a sandpaper, right? And then I'm guessing Finn was gonna tell Rey how he truly felt, or there's something, right? There's obviously a mystery around Finn's feelings towards Rey, even though it seems very obvious that he likes her. It doesn't. I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, because I thought it wasn't that obvious anymore because Rose's character and obviously Finn's character. I thought there was going to be some sort of progression there, but so I thought that was going to add the spin in the works. But nothing amounted to that, to their relationship, and nothing amounted to Rey's and Finn's relationship as well. So it was like, so you introduce 2 relationships in an episode. Well, obviously Rey and Finn's relationship always kind of started off from Rey's introduction, but technically there's 2 relationships which are unfinished. It felt like unfinished relationships in this movie, even though Kylo Ren did kiss Rhea. He's dead. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't think Finn ended up saying what he was gonna say to Rhea before they sunk at the end of the movie, did he? Or...
Yeah, there's one weird choice, right? Like 2 or 3 times he starts to say something important, seemingly important, and then he gets interrupted, and then we're in the next scene, and he never actually gets to say it.
It's like they forgot to finish.
Yeah, except they did it 3 times, so they can't have
line.
forgotten, right? Like we can go through every individual plot point and everything. We can talk about whether or not it makes sense and whether it adds to a good story or not. But I think for me, everything in this movie is kind of there, not because for story reasons, but because they thought it would fix everything is there because of the anticipated fan reaction, I think. And as a result, nothing really means anything. But there's a lot of things there that kind of either look good or are superficially what people have been asking for, but nothing that really amounts to a story, really, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, so I've got a few examples, but the Knights of Ren are one example of this, right? So I think they were mentioned in episode 7, were absent in episode 8, if I remember correctly, and they are basically Kylo Ren's elite Force users, right? And they were all black, and they looked like they walked out of a death metal video. But none of them have names. None of them has personalities. They are not part of the story. They just show up and look cool. And to me, that's kind of the epitome of what this movie is, right? It's like stuff that seems to be related to a Star Wars movie, but it doesn't actually carry any meaning. Right? Another example of this is, like, in the original trilogy, everything about the Empire was either deliberate or kind of worked out as characterization, right? So, for example, the fact that X-Wings can go to light speed and TIE fighters can't has a reason, which is that the rebellion is about individuals and about people working together for a common goal, whereas the Empire is about conformity and coercion. So if you are a TIE fighter pilot, you are kind of an extension of your commander's will, and so you're not supposed to act independently, right? You're supposed to be shackled to a Star Destroyer. And that is why a TIE fighter can't go to light speed and can't act on its own, right? And here the TIE fighters just follow the Millennium Falcon through the light speed skipping from one planet to the next, and nobody cares, right? This is not just a little trivia, like this is not just about pointing out, but the TIE fighters used to work differently in other movie, therefore it's bad. It's more like, this used to mean something. It used to mean something why the TIE fighters can't go to light speed. But now they can, but there's no reason for it. See what I mean? To me, the entire movie is this way.
And to add to that, because I brought up this point before in terms of like the Force, because now it seems like the Force has kind of gone out of hand now. Regarding what, because like I said, I thought there was some sort of Christianity influence because Rey is out here healing people like she's Jesus. So I'm like, whoa, like what's going on? So, what was people's reaction to how the Force was portrayed in this film?
So the Force healing thing specifically was what got a very negative reaction, and there's more than one aspect to it. One of them is that in like the role-playing games and the comics and the books, there has been Force healing in the past. And they basically took it from that. And the other aspect is that the Force is all about life being connected with all other life. And so it kind of stands to reason that manipulating life in some way is something the Force should be able to do. So I wasn't as bent out of shape about that as a lot of other people were. It's more that I generally think healing powers are a good way to destroy your story because it removes stakes. And it doesn't really seem to really create nothing good happens because of this in the story, right? And it's also not an expression of who Rey is. Like if Rey was a healer or somebody who builds bridges or something like that, right? And therefore she has Force healing, that could mean something, but it doesn't, right? So it's kind of just there because we want people to talk about it on Twitter.
And I think what they did wrong in terms of like the way that the portrayal of the Force, I understand that the Force, it can be evolution to the Force, but there was never a reaction to actually seeing evolution to the Force. Like it seemed like even like whenever, it just seemed like whenever the character saw the Force in play, it just seemed like, oh, okay, yeah, that we're familiar with that, or that, you know what I'm saying? It just seems like there was familiarity behind it rather than, oh crap, that the Force can do this, because it just felt like they were just adding to the Force. And if it's a thing where, like you mentioned in terms of like healing was always in the comic books, then cool, show us like obviously don't explain it to us literally, but show us that the Force could do this somehow, some way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like maybe there could be like a speech where someone talks on the prophecy, but they speak on it in terms of the Force and what the abilities of someone that can, you know what I'm saying, in a way that kind of informs us the extent of what the Force is. Because for me, I just felt like they were just adding on stuff to the Force. Like I wouldn't be surprised if the Force could have turned her Super Saiyan or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
I do think this is kind of the point at which everything related to the Force kind of completely goes off the rails. And from this point forward, there's no real concept to what the Force is, and you can't really tell what a character should be able to do. Like there's the scene where both Rey and Kylo hold a ship in place, right, as it tries to take off. that kind of creates plot problems, right? Because now every time a ship gets away, you have to ask the question, why didn't Rey just pull it back, for example, right? So it doesn't seem thought through. It's more like a matter of this will make for a cool scene we can put in the trailer.
Yeah, I agree with that. But you haven't actually said what were your views on this movie? Like, you've kind of course, I'm guessing that you didn't like it, but overall, like, yeah,
so,
what do you think of the film?
So I think this movie is the result of Lucasfilm panicking after The Last Jedi came out. And they tried to kind of fix it, make it seem like this was planned all along or part of a bigger story. But as a result, because they have to bring a story to the conclusion that has not really started yet, right? Like none of the first two movies really did very much to actually set stuff up. There's stuff happening, but it's kind of going, like every movie is going in a completely different direction. And so this is not the conclusion to our story. It is trying to contain the damage that the last two movies did. I think that's what this is. And so I don't really take it seriously as a story because I don't think there is one. I think it's purely trying to save face and minimize the damage and preserve as much value of the brand as possible. And so talking about character arcs and whatever, it's almost doesn't matter because that's not the kind of movie this is. That's my opinion.
For me, I just see it as wasted potential. Like all throughout the movie, I just see so much wasted potential. I mean, you've got things like obviously when Finn meets the girl, where sort of she and her group are a bunch of like ex-stormtroopers, etc. It seems like Finn could have been set on that path to have been sort of the one that helped a lot of stormtroopers kind of like rebel against sort of the Empire and sort of kind of bring people over to sort of the resistance side of things. All these kids that were forced to sort of become stormtroopers from very young. I see that as wasted potential. I know, again, sort of all the Jedis that have come before, the family name didn't really matter. But when they've ended up making sort of obviously Kylo Ren related to Leia's sort of the son, and making what's her name, Rhea, the granddaughter of Palpatine, there could have been an interesting sort of message or like discussion about like kind of like family or something. Like you could have like intertwined sort of like the theme of family and sort of maybe like some of the dysfunction or like not being like previous generation. It could have been something. There was like an idea there that could have been expounded on, but at the end of the day, it was again wasted potential. It was nothing. I think
So when The Force Awakens came out and the big speculation started about who Rey's parents were, I thought they were Imperial officers, mostly because of her accent, right? The posh English accent has always been like an indicator that somebody is part of the Imperial establishment, right? They since the very first movie they've cast English actors as the Imperials, right? And so I thought the fact that they cast an English actress as a protagonist with a mysterious past was a clue that her heritage was somehow linked to the Empire, and I thought they were Imperial officers. And that she would find this out, and then she would have to make a choice between, do I do the right thing, or do I get what I want, which is have an identity and belong somewhere?
And the fact
that would have been a very cool story.
Yeah, the fact that you say that could have actually tied into Finn's story, because if they were Imperial officers that turned their back on the Empire and sort of wanted to protect their granddaughter, and then you got Finn that's a sort of a deserter of sort of the Empire as well, you have something in common there which they can kind of like then build on and expand on as well. I feel like, again, there was something potentially there that could have been explored more deeply.
There's this whole theme of identity, right? Because Rey wants to belong somewhere and she doesn't know who she is. Finn was ripped from his family at a very young age and turned into a henchman. And now that he has deserted, he has no ties to anybody and needs to figure stuff out. Kylo has this heritage of both good and bad guys in his lineage, right? And he's being pulled into both directions at a time, and he becomes the pawn of Snoke and Palpatine, we later find out, right? So there is stuff going on here.
Yeah.
And I think if it hadn't been for The Last Jedi, then we could have had a movie, like a trilogy that follows these characters as they discover themselves and find their place in the galaxy, right? Like this thing is not doomed from the start. It could very well have been something. And the fact that it isn't, I think, is, like you say, complete wasted potential.
Again, there's a lot of good things in all of these movies. Like you said, like the visuals, some of the fight scenes and stuff like that. It's just like the story that connects all three movies is just not strong enough.
So as I was watching the Rise, more so for this movie than the other two, I thought this is very expensive, very pretty nonsense, and I wish it meant something.
Do you know?
Because all of this work that goes into creating these visuals and these set pieces and these sceneries, it all looks great, but there's nothing going on, right? None of it means anything. None of it builds to anything. None of it is connected to anything. It's just noise. And all of this talent and work, I'm almost finished. All of this talent and work could have gone towards telling a story. And that's the thing that, like, I used to be a little bit more aggravated about this, like 6 years ago, right? But the fact still remains. Nothing has changed really about this, right?
No. And so, kind of like speaking on the visuals and it potentially like meaning something in regards to the story, what I thought could have been interesting, and I don't know whether it was done intentionally or not, was sort of the contrast between Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight on sort of the lava planet where there's all like the fire and stuff like that. And if you contrast it to Ren and Rey's fight on sort of the ship with the sea crashing and this, that, and the other, I don't know whether that was done intentionally. I don't know sort of what kind of like symbolism was meant to be there. But again, that could have been a good sort of connection between sort of that and the previous, if you're kind of telling an interesting story there. But like, I don't know whether it was just coincidence or whether there was something.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of aping things, right? Like trying to make things look similar so that it feels like it means something. But if you think about it for 5 seconds, you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that it doesn't. Yeah, so there's lots more to talk about. We haven't really talked about the fact that Rey takes on the Skywalker name at the end, which I think is just pure.
Yeah, that was so confusing. I'm sorry, I didn't get that part.
Well, here's the explanation. It gets people talking on the internet. That's why it happens.
Well, but why? I get it. Maybe because she had a lot of respect for her master Luke, but at the same time, it's like to the point where you're gonna.
But did she really? Like, she spent like a weekend with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, true, but obviously Luke is such a prominent figure in the universe, so it's like, you're gonna build connections with people that the whole world admires. Yeah.
Right. So I don't think there is any, like, it's not like she found family among the Skywalkers, and now she wants to continue their name or anything, right? It's purely that she calls herself that because it feels profound in the moment if you don't think about it. Like, if you're supposed to leave the cinema and have a warm, fuzzy feeling about it, and then you're not supposed to think about it anymore. That's why that happens.
Yeah, but yeah, I hear that. But there was no reason, as in there was no build up to her actually being called a Skywalker. That sounds like, wow, that doesn't make sense. I get that okay, cool. You don't want to be called freaking Rey. Palpatine's, is it Palpatine? That's his second name, right?
But then that's wasted potential still. Like, to me, that's wasted potential. You've got like one of the biggest villains in the in the Skywalker saga, that was sort of Palpatine, and then you can then have Rey sort of kind of repurpose that and like then sort of give the name sort of a new meaning and take it to sort of somewhere different and bring it to the light side. Again, it's wasted potential that just wasn't really well thought out.
You can imagine a character arc that ends with her reclaiming the name Palpatine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I would, because that could get her killed.
Right, but it could be something like, it's not your name that defines you, it's your actions.
Yeah.
Right? And I may be a Palpatine, but I'm not a villain. That kind of thing.
That could bring her into a new story. So I do agree with that, actually. Maybe if she did call herself Palpatine, then, kind of like redefining that her name as one point, as in like one theme, and then the new movie could have been explored. So yeah, okay, I kind of agree with that. But the whole Skywalker thing, that makes sense.
Because it's quite interesting, because I know that they are working on a Rey movie, a new movie for Rey, and it's like, are we going to go into it with her still being Rey Skywalker, which is controversial. I don't know if many people even like that, or whether they take a character. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, but that's a video for another day.
Yeah.
So before we finish, I've got a question for Hervé. You just had a child, right?
Yeah.
And in circa 2038, he's going to be old enough to appreciate Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. Are you going to show him Star Wars, and if so, which ones?
I don't think I'll actually, which is really disappointing. I don't think, of the franchises that I grew up watching, I don't think Star Wars will be high up on the list of things to show him.
Any specific reasons?
It's not great. It's not great. If I compare it to some of the ones that I'm excited about, like your Harry Potters, your Marvel movies, your even Dune, fantastic. These are things that I've loved throughout, and I can't wait. Like, I'm so excited to introduce him to it and sit down and watch it with him. Star Wars is for me too much of a mixed bag, and I'll have to be doing a lot of explaining as to why this didn't turn out to be great.
Even if you just limit it to the original trilogy?
I don't think I love the original trilogy enough to introduce it to him, personally.
Okay. So, final question, Jonathan, what's your final takeaway on Star Wars? You've just now seen the entire thing, like the entire main series. What's your takeaway?
I could rate my takeaway, which would be, I'd give the whole franchise a 6 out of 10.
Do you understand why it's such a classic, or because when you go back to our first video, you were kind of lukewarm on episode 4, right?
Yeah. I think the only thing I could say, it's obviously it was the first of its kind when it comes to obviously like the technology which was used. Like that's potentially the only thing that I could, muster up in defense of Star Wars. In terms of like the story itself, and I think for me the reason why it wouldn't be high on my list when it comes to other franchises and just like the whole sci-fi genre is because, like I've mentioned this many times, like having that emotional connection with something that I watch is very important. Like if there's like emotional feelings that are triggered while I'm watching something, then this makes it memorable for me. In terms of Star Wars itself, I don't think that's why I think it was missing.
Does it have rewatch potential for you? Like, does this go on the shelf?
Honestly, no. But it was a good experience. It was definitely a good experience, and it's a good reference. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I feel like a good experience, good reference for me personally. But in terms of rewatch value, I can't say so. No.
Just add. What's really strange for me is I actually really love the universe, and I engage with the universe anytime that there's something new coming out. Like there's the Star Wars Outlaws game that's coming out in like a month or so or whatever, which I'm actually going to go and buy and play. Like I feel like there's so much good potential in the universe. I just feel like over the years it's just been tarnished or ripped apart or kind of like just been mishandled completely. And again, I wish for the future of it that they just step away from this particular period that we're in Star Wars and just tell a brand new story in 100 years in the future, 200 years in the future. Just be so far removed from here, and then just start again and give us something to love again about Star Wars.
Yeah. For me, I think I'm more emotionally invested in Star Wars than the both of you are put together. And like every time I hear the fanfare and I see the Star Wars image on the black background, like something in the back of my head gets excited, right? Yeah. But for me, Star Wars is over. Like Star Wars is basically the 6 movies that form a complete story, and everything else is basically an epilogue. And parts of that can be good, right? Like I can list a couple of things that have been good since then, but I don't think the universe is going anywhere. I don't think there's anybody has any stories left to tell in them, which is not the same thing as there being no potential. But like for me, Star Wars is a thing that I have on my shelf and it's done and it's complete. And I actually rewatch it. Like somehow every December I'm in a Star Wars mood and I just rewatch the movies that I consider good. And that's not going to change anytime soon. But I think it's basically a completed franchise as far as I'm concerned, because I don't think anybody really understands why Star Wars works, right? Like when you go back through our videos about specifically the original trilogy, there's a lot of things there where if you really dig into it, into character arcs and the details of the world building and stuff like that, there's a lot of meaning there and there's a lot of things there that make it work. And I don't think the people making Star Wars understand why the original trilogy worked. And if you don't understand that, then you can't make more of it. And so for that reason, for me, it's basically a completed franchise.
So does that mean you won't engage with any new movies that come out?
Unless I hear really good things about it. But basically, I don't think people are capable of making good Star Wars because it's too important. Right? There's too many eyes on it. There's too much money involved. And so nobody can just tell a story. It has to be hyper calculated and it has to be part of our 10-year plan and whatever else. And I think that basically I don't expect Star Wars to be interesting again. Right? Like, some of it may be good in various ways. Like, I'm looking forward to season 2 of Andor because season 1 was good and there was a story to tell there and it told it well and so on. But just in general, I don't think the universe is going anywhere. Okay, on that happy note, should we sign out here?
Yeah, it looks like end to a series. Guys, I hope you enjoyed us going through pretty much the whole franchise, the Star Wars universe. Please let us know what you think. Let us know if you are disappointed with what you've seen. Let us know if you're happy with what you've seen. Let us know if you agree. Let us know if you disagree.
And yeah, like, if you enjoyed this discussion, haven't seen any of the previous videos, of course, like this one, go check out all the other ones that we've done on all the other episodes as well. Go and hear Jonathan's controversial takes on some of the Last Jedi as well, for sure.
He liked Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah. There you go.
Just to give you a little preview.
There you have it. If you wanna be angry, if you want a bit of rage bait or whatever, just go check out those videos.
Alright, guys, we will catch you next week. We will be doing a new series, by the way, which you guys will obviously know. You'll find out soon. But yeah, guys, we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.